Welcome to the RotoGrinders Today. I'm Jordan Cooper, a.k.a. BlenderHD. If you want to follow me on Twitter. And it's Thursday, September 14th. We'll be talking about some NFL Showdown tonight for Vikings versus Eagles. Taking some of your questions. You could always submit them to the mailbag. Questions at theoryofdfs.com. That goes directly to me. We'll touch on some props for tonight. Props, pick them. Anything that you're thinking about today in DFS props and pick them. Hit that thumbs up button. Give me those thummy thumbs here in the morning. I love the thummy thumbs. Hit the like button. Hit the subscribe button. Hit the notification bell to know when we go live. Joined in the morning, early in the morning, with John Breslin, aka Squirrelpatrol. Sorry to make you wake up early.
No, I'm East Coast, so it's not that bad. Like I get up before 9 anyway, so I've been up for a few hours.
Well, we have a showdown slate tonight. We're gonna be looking at that on DraftKings. You know, they're a million to first if you win it solo. I know someone did on Monday with the way that game kind of went with the Jets at the end with the kickoff, the punt return, the wild swing on one play. It's like, here's a solo million.
I was winning that going into the last drive of regulation tied with only 3 other people. This is like 300 plus thousand. But I realized I needed nothing to happen. I needed 3 incompletions. Somebody had the Jets defense behind me, and somebody had Josh Allen behind me. So like if Allen ran for a yard, which is ultimately what he did, or had a completion, like I knew I was going to lose it. If he got sacked, like the Jets were going to pass me. So I was like, it was great to look at, but I knew it wasn't gonna hold.
Is it one of those types of things that you look at and you're like, oh, tied 3 ways for first for $300,000, and then 3 plays later, it's like, oh, you're down like 20% on the day.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think I ended up getting like 1,700 back from the 2,250 entry fee, but I knew that was going to happen, and like really, I've had like pretty good success with Showdown with like single entry qualifiers, 10x's, like a lot of the other contests. So like it's actually a pretty good feeling because I generally make money, even if I'm not winning the ultimate, $300,000 prize.
Right, DFIC in the chat says the winner had a reasonable build.
Yeah,
reasonable, I guess. I mean, not like completely crazy, but let's take a look at tonight's showdown from an overarching view. I mean, I'm bringing up the projections here. We'll talk about some certain situations. These 2 teams, the Vikings and the Eagles, are reasonably like condensed types of teams. I get the sense that in Showdown tonight that there's a more likely chance than in other showdowns that the winning lineup is like split like 32 ways, 67 ways, something like that, because I don't think there's all that many options like in like the cheap end that project well, and then you only have so many, you have to choose six players out of maybe 15 or so. Do you get that sense, or do you feel as if the construction to get uniquer, right, less duped, just involves maybe leaving more salary on the table, but it's not the type of slate where it's like some $200 guy, some $400 guy is going to be the make or break, or maybe you feel the opposite.
I maybe lean a little more towards the opposite because I think there's like some questions in the Eagles' backfield. Because was it Gainwell? I think is out. So you've got 2 cheaper running backs for the Eagles. We really don't have any idea what it's going to look like. Actually, I guess you've got 3. Because you've got DeAndre Swift, Rashad Penny, both of whom they acquired in the offseason and then didn't really use in week 1. Like I think Swift had like very minimal usage, and Penny, I think he was healthy and active. And then they've got Boston Scott as well, and like those guys are all 4,000 or less on DraftKings, and we don't know what that workload is going to look like at all. And even when we think we know, we usually don't know. So like even like look at the Jets game, like all of the words were like, yeah, Dalvin Cook is going to get the majority of the usage. And I don't know how the carries ended up breaking down, but I know like Breece Hall ended up having a much bigger game just on the back. He had like an 80-yard non-touchdown run. Uh, but they did use him a good amount. So like we never know how these backfield situations are gonna break down, and this one's like particularly murky.
But they're all cheap. I mean, like DeAndre Swift is 4,000, right? We have Boston Scott 2,200, Rashad Penny 1,600. He's expected to be active. Our ownership currently doesn't have him in. I mean, he has him with the projection of 5.7 as a mean, but at 0% ownership, I mean, I'm assuming that's going to be higher. Assuming he's in, right? More than 0% owned. At these prices, do you think that, I mean, I don't think Boston Scott's going to be 1.55% owned either. These are going to be probably the popular pieces to put in as the cheap piece. Because obviously, here's where the kickers and the defenses are, right? You got Elliott, you got Joseph, you got Vikings, the Eagles at 4,400. But like underneath these guys, I mean, Ty Chandler, Josh Oliver, CJ Ham, Brandon Powell, Olamide Zacchaeus. I mean, really not, Grand Calcaterra. I mean, these types of guys. Do you think the key to the slate is figuring out the Eagles' backfield?
I think so. And I think because they're all so cheap, like that enables you to have some pretty unique combinations and leave a ton of salary on the table and still have a plausible build, right? Because you have players, it could be like let's say it's not divided among all three of them. Let's say it's Rashad Penny. Like suddenly you've got a $1,600 guy that is a plausible captain if he's like like if he's the main running back.
Would you play two together?
I think so. And usually, so I'm doing like an article now for Thursday night and Monday night football, and one of the sections I put into that article is like the rule that I would break for this showdown slate, because I think it's so common to like make groups, even if you're just hand building, like make mental groups that prevent you from getting the winning lineup. And like in this situation, like they're so cheap that why couldn't they both really hit their salary? And in that case, I think you would need the higher priced guys to go off. Like you would need like Jalen Hurts, AJ Brown, like Justin Jefferson to have big games. But then it's like, yeah, if the both running backs like exceed their salary expectation, then that can be the winning line.
Right. It could be that Rashad Penny may not have a monster game, but may have like 8 points at 1,600, and you may need him. Right. It's DeAndre Swift may have 10 points at 4,000, and you may need him because Jefferson has 30 and Hurts has 30 and AJ Brown is 24. Like the only way to fit these guys in is in those scenarios. Now we have a 48.5 total, which is a fairly healthy total, especially for a Thursday night game. We're used to the Thursday night garbage games. Most people, I'm going to assume, are going to build for a higher scoring game. In what ways could that fail? Because I mean, we could obviously talk about, well, Justin Jefferson and the captain, or Jalen Hurts and the captain. It's like these are the common builds. I don't think we need to go over like, yeah, if the game's 35-28, who's the players that are more likely to score points? But what happens if this is a more lower scoring game? What types of constructions may make you a little less duplicated in this type of showdown, especially for large field contests where maybe you don't want to be on the train of 68 people trying to split first place?
Right. I can see some like plausible scenarios. So like Minnesota knows that they're going into Philadelphia and they're playing Jalen Hurts, right? So like maybe it makes sense for them to shorten the game if they can. So like just run the ball with like Alexander Madison. I think their backup is Ty Chandler, and he's maybe a little bit too cheap. Uh, and so like what if they're just running the ball and they're not throwing Justin Jefferson into to Addison because they don't want Jalen Hurts on the field. So I think it's a plausible scenario, and I don't think that's something people are going to be building for because it's not fun, and but it's a way that a coach would think, right? Like I don't want Jalen Hurts throwing the ball all over my porous pass defense, so we're going to shorten this game as much as possible.
Well, in my dummy build for me, just like going on the app and let's see what type of lineup may be a little bit off the board. I put Alexander Madison in the captain spot.
Yeah, exactly. I think he'll be an underowned captain, and then let's say you're pairing him with the Eagles running backs, like one of the Eagles running backs or both. Like that's shooting for an under the game total scenario. But like yeah, sometime 50% of the time, right? This game's going to go under the total.
How about an under the game total type of scenario where we saw in the first game that Kirk Cousins has a little bit of yippee hands, right? Kind of maybe some fumbles or something. Eagles defense in the captain, maybe like a 5-1 lineup, right? You play Eagles defense in the captain, and then you just basically jam all the high price Eagles in, right? And get some cheap Vikings piece. I think of that type of lineup. We see here, we put the Eagles captain in. I'm going to show it on the screen, right? You put Eagles captain. You play in this type of scenario that the Eagles have the ball like 45 minutes of the game, right? Because of, turnovers and stuff like that, you could fit in like Hurts, Brown, right? Like Penny, right? I mean, you could fit everyone you want. I mean, like you could put in Penny, you could put in Devonta Smith, right? You still have 10-8, and you still put Jefferson there for raw points. I mean, what's wrong with this time? Even if you take out Penny, you got salary remaining, right? You could
Yeah.
put in, well, you can't put in DeAndre Swift, right?
Yeah, then you might have to get a little bit cheaper. I don't know if you can do both Eagles wide receivers.
Both Eagles wide receiver, right? We can't do both Eagles wide receivers. Maybe do Goddard.
Yeah,
You
that's
can,
actually I think that's a better choice too because it's like the Eagles aren't necessarily throwing the ball all over the field. Like maybe Goddard's just getting a red zone touchdown, like more methodical drives.
right. You got 11-6 left. Okay, no, you can't. But I mean, you could leave some money on the table, right? You put Rashad Penny because they're running the ball a lot, and you put Jefferson for raw points, and you leave 1,600 on the table.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Jefferson makes sense there. Like the Vikings have a couple turnovers, maybe a pick six, and so now they have to throw the ball at Jefferson, but they just keep getting turnovers and sacks, right? So
Right.
Jefferson's piling up receptions, but Cousins doesn't make the lineup, because of the turnovers and because they're just not scoring. So that makes Eagles defense the winning captain. The Eagles offensive pieces are doing enough for raw points that you need them. But the only Viking you need is Jefferson.
Right. It seems like the trend is on Showdown that the higher the scoring the game is expected to be, the kickers and the defenses are typically underowned. And in the garbage games where it's like, 39 and a half total, that's typically where the kickers and defense tend to be overowned, and you kind of play it for a higher scoring game.
Yeah, that actually it was like a learning lesson for me. I mean, it's a couple of years ago. I think it's like 2020, but I had a huge showdown night. I remember it was Baltimore Cleveland, and Justin Tucker was the winning captain. I think like won like multiple qualifier seats for DraftKings football. I think I tied for first for whatever it was worth for the main showdown contest. But Justin Tucker was the captain and the game was like 33-30 or something like that. Because the high priced guys, we were like Nick Chubb and Lamar Jackson, like you needed to have all of them. Like they put up so many points and they were so expensive. You had to have all of those guys. But that means you couldn't fit all of the high priced salary guys like into the lineup without Justin Tucker. It's like the higher scoring the game where the main expensive guys are putting up points, like the more you need the kicker that's getting, I think maybe had like 12 or 15 points. And, if you had a good kicker game for his salary, but like you needed the cheaper guy to fit in all the expensive guys.
Well, all the expensive guys on this slate, we have all the guys that are 9K or above are essentially the quarterbacks, the two main Eagles receivers, and Justin Jefferson. If you're building one lineup, right? Let's say you're building one lineup, and maybe you're playing single entries. Maybe like the $100 or $200 contest, maybe 2,000, 3,000 entries. What would be, in your opinion, as of right now? I mean, this is kind of like a first look. There'll be a pre-lock show later today on the channel at 7:30 Eastern, so definitely tune into that. Which player? I know it's lineups, not players. I always stress this. But if you're building one lineup, you personally, who are you more likely in smaller field stuff, but not the smallest field stuff, but small enough? who are you more likely to build around and have in your lineup, and who you're less? Are you more likely to play like a Hurts captain with no Jefferson? Are you more likely to play Jefferson captain but just no Hurts? Like what would be the main way to distinguish yourself? Because all these 9K plus guys are going to be the highest owned guys. Who are you more comfortable fading, and who are you more comfortable locking in?
Now that I'm just kind of thinking about it now, I think Devontae Smith might be a really sharp captain because I think most people aren't going to be thinking about putting the wide receivers at captain. Uh, and like I think just because the big names, right? Like so Jalen Hurts, Justin Jefferson, like I think they're going to monopolize a lot of the captain ownership. And I'm guessing that Devontae Smith is going to be under-owned at captain for his chances of success. Because even if you think of a wide receiver, like you're going to go to Justin Jefferson or AJ Brown, I think Devontae Smith is right there in terms of like his projection and in his chances of being optimal. Plus, it gives you a little bit more salary. I don't know with the Eagles running backs if you need it on this slate, but I'm guessing you'll get like pretty different. Like I guess I'm guessing he's going to come in at less than 10% captain ownership, right? So if he hits, you're eliminating 90% of the field.
Right, and this would be for this would be more for smaller field single entry, where this type of lineup may still be like duplicated maybe 15 or 20 times in the milli to first, but it may be either unique or only duped once or twice in your contest. And that's kind of like the balance you're trying to, you're not trying to make these crazy lineups for a 2,000, 3,000 field contest, maybe for 150,000, but you also don't want to end up in a 2,000 person contest where you're duped 40 times.
Right. I've actually had an interesting situation. Like already this year, I had a lineup, I think, for the Dallas Giants game where I won. Like I didn't get into the main contest, right? It like filled before I could get my lineups. And I think, yeah, it was Sunday Night Football. So like paying attention to all of my like main slate results. And I'm like, oh, I only have like a few minutes to get to get my showdown in. And I got it in, but I got it into like the secondary contest and I won, which is great. But it was I won $5,000, which is great. That lineup in the main contest would have won like 200 because it wouldn't have finished first because there's so many entries. Like you have to get so crazy to have like a unique winner. Like I got a unique winner in the smaller like 10,000 person contest rather than the 150,000 person contest.
Right. Mr. Gergen chat says nobody's going to play Goddard at captain, especially with his airball last week. And that's another route to go.
Sorry, was it
with playing Goddard at captain? I mean, but these are the types of builds that I'd be looking at. But also, one of the things in Showdown, and I've highlighted this so often last year on the pre-lock show, is that understand the size of the contests that you're in, because people, what they will do is they'll look at, oh, I'll play Rashad Penny, let's say, at captain. Right? You see this all the time, John, right? They'll go, I'm going to play, he's only a $2,400 captain, right? And let's just say in the captain spot, he's 1% owned. Let's just say. Obviously, he's not going to be zero. Our ownership needs to be updated, right? So he's 1% owned in the captain. And they go, well, Penny's up there. I'm going to play Jefferson, right? I'm going to play, let's go to the flex. I'm going to play Jefferson. I'm going to play Jalen Hurts. Right, I'm going to play Alexander Madison. I'm going to play, maybe not even Madison. I'm going to play
Brown,
DeAndre Swift.
Yeah.
Right, and then Kirk Cousins.
Brown. Yep.
Right, and then AJ Brown. Right, perfectly. Right, I'm going to
max it out. Yeah.
It's a 50K lineup, and look, I have a 1% owned captain, and then they go, and then even before and the game even starts, the contest lock, you go look, and it's like, oh, I'm playing this. Look, no one's playing this. And you see your lineup is duped 142 times.
Right.
And you go, how is that possible? Well, it's a 150,000 person contest, entry contest. What's 1% of 150,000? It's 1,500 lineups that have Penny in the captain. How many of those use all the salary and all the best players?
Yeah.
A lot of them.
I've actually noticed in Showdown that my most duplicated lineups are the most duplicated lineups. I realize just looking at my own results, but are not the highest optimal lineups. It's the highest optimal lineups for each captain. are what tends to be duplicated the most because people think
Right.
like, oh, I'm gonna like switch the captain. Like, yeah, I'm gonna do like the highest projected lineup with Rashad Penny at the captain is gonna be owned like duplicated more often than the highest projected, than like the eighth projected, say, Devontae Smith lineup.
Right. Right. The same thing. Like if you're going to play this type of lineup, it's like, okay, take out Hurts and put in Dallas Goddard there and leave 5,600 on the table.
Yeah.
Right. That now it's possible. But then people look at this and go, well, I don't like this lineup anymore. It's like, yeah, you like it because you can fit in everyone, but you're also going to be duplicated a million times.
Yeah, it's tough though because you got to think like in that scenario, like if you could afford Hurts, but you're putting in Goddard, you need Goddard to outscore Hurts,
Right.
which is it's probably like maybe 8 receptions, but it's a tough.
It's a tough ask. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
One of the things that we do have here at RotoGrinders is the Showdown Sim tool, which we put out for every island game Thursday, Sunday, Monday, and it'll be run a couple of times a day. So this is just in the morning, the first run with our current ownership. This is for DraftKings and FanDuel, and Jamino basically runs a contest sim using our ownership and player projections. Captain ownership, flex ownership, and looks at what does the top 0.1% lineups look like? What's their construction look like? Compare it to ownership of like it'll say like wide receiver 1 in our simulations as of 11 in the morning. Like I said, especially with the Eagles backfield, these projections may change a bit. That wide receiver 1, which is like AJ Brown or Justin Jefferson, shows up in the top 1.1% lineups 21.96% of the time, but we have their current projected ownership as 28.71%. So that would be like negative leverage. John, do you use our sim tool or at least look at what it's kind of spitting out based on the RotoGrinders projections?
I do actually now. Just starting the season for Main Slate, I write an article on this, like on the top stacks, and we don't like call this tool out enough. And even they're like even within the tool, like it's deceptively powerful. So like looking at that, like the ownership, like the QB1 ownership or whatever, like 28% versus 21% is a big deal. Like it seems like, oh, it's just like 7%. Like, no, that's like 25% difference, right? Between, or 30 something percent difference between the 21 and the 28.
Right.
Like, that's a
Or
big
I
deal.
think, John, the better way to think about it is think about it as number of lineups. So there's a
Yeah.
7% difference. But if you're playing 150,000 lineup contest, 7% is 10,500 lineups. So the wide receiver 1 as captain, our simulations say 10,000 plus lineups are overrepresented in the contest, while white like something like even quarterback 1, you're like, oh, the difference is like 2%. It's like,
Yeah.
no, that's 3,000 less lineups that there should be with the quarterback. So maybe you could feel the scale of what the differences in percentage mean, even though from a raw number, it's like, well, 7 isn't all that big. Like 7 is huge.
Yeah, it's like we need to like visually call that out somehow on this like tool because I didn't even realize that like looking at this tool a little bit, we actually have developed this now for MMA contests.
Mm.
And that's really interesting to look at. And I was like looking at it and it's like, oh, the percentages don't seem that big. But like if you think about like, oh, this fighter is like overrepresented by a factor of like 33%. Like that's a much bigger deal than like the 28 ownership versus 21% optimal rate.
Right. So you could look at this tool if you're a RotoGrinders premium member, right? Get a combo premium. You get everything. You get MLB, you get all of our NFL stuff. You get PGA, you get NBA. They'll be back next month. You'll get college football, college basketball. You get everything. You get everything. MMA, soccer. You get our projections for that. So click on the link in the description. Get $10 off your first month. Join us in the Discord. I have a premium channel, Blender's Game Theory, where you could talk to me anytime you'd like. But you're right. We don't point this out enough, and that's why I want to highlight this on Tool Time today. We have a question from the mailbag that I want to get to. I saved it specifically for you. We talked about playing Showdown for like single entry, right? Like there's a different, do you have to get nutso? No, you still have to get a little bit nutso, right? But how about on like the main slate? So we have a classic slate coming up. We had a 13 game slate. Like we're not really concerned necessarily about like uniqueness, even in like the millie contest. It's very rarely a consideration. But I do have a question in from Jason Wolf that he wanted to address if you could address broad heuristics. So just very very macro strategy that would help a DFS player think about how to make different lineup constructions in like a contest like the Millie Maker, a large field play action, the even the slant, like 5+ figure entries, 10,000, 50,000, 100,000 versus like single entry, like high dollar, like the spy or the power sweep, which is not, truthfully, in NFL, it's not that small of a field. And when we're still talking about 3 to 5,000 entries, I know that you play both types of contests, max multi-entry for the large field, but also build these kind of single entry 3-max lineups. Is there some broad macro strategy? Of course, lineups, not players, so you could break some of the rules a lot of the time. But if you were advising someone that is like, I'm used to building Millie Maker type lineups, how do I convert that into single entry 3-max and then vice versa?
So I think for single entry and 3-max, I think you don't want to get too far off the old, like the highest projected lineup in terms of like a raw projection. Like there just isn't a need to. Like you just don't see these games like, every week we're gonna have some like 40, 42 point games, right? Game total games. You're like Cleveland, Cincinnati, or whatever. Just these grinded out games, and there's really no reason to necessarily like make that your single entry, like a stack from that game, have it be your single entry lineup, your 3-max lineup. Like I pick, 5, or so games, right, that I might like, and you can spread those out across like single entry, 3-max. Like take the quarterbacks from those games. I think running quarterbacks tend to be undervalued because people just don't realize how much the rushing points count. So like last week, I used a lot of Anthony Richardson, uh, and just like have a plausible stack from that game. Like I tend to also emphasize like avoid the really chalky defenses. Like last week, we had the Washington Commanders defense. I made a point of in my content of saying I think like that's going to be way over owned. I forget what they ended up coming in at, like 20 something percent.
Yeah, but I think at the single entry 3-max, they were like 40+%.
Yeah, like that's absurd. They don't have a 40% chance of being the best defense. Like defensive scoring is so random. I think a lot of the winning lineups in contests still had the Commanders defense, but it was more a factor of them being 40% owned or whatever, or 30% owned in those contests. They didn't put up that many points. Like I think Arizona ended up outscoring them.
Right, but I mean, that was the only defense that really separated themselves from the pack. I think the Commanders put up 11 points, which
Yeah,
is fine.
yeah,
I didn't think defense didn't win you or lose you anything in single entry 3-max. But I
yeah.
think the main macro point that you're stating is that get away from ownership to a certain degree, even if it's by 1 or 2 like positions. Like maybe you don't play the chalkiest running back and the chalkiest defense, but once you're done with that, like stack a good game and then play the kind of the maybe not the best plays, but high projected plays around there. You don't have to do all of them. Like you have almost like 5 different things that you could do. It's like, okay, do I play an off the board stack? Do I play an off the board running back? Do I play an off the board wide receiver? Do I play an off the board construction? Do I play an off the board defense? And it's like pick like maybe 2 of those. And then the rest is like kind of play like towards the top of the, last week, did you have to play Mostert and Jamal Williams together? No. But if you built a lineup that was, a little bit off the board stack, it's like you're probably playing one of them in that single entry 3-max build. You're not trying to fade 5 different things at once. It's like kind of pick 2 things and then build the lineup the way that if you were just playing any other contest, like you were just trying to cash, that you're going to be different enough in the single entry 3-max that Like, don't just sacrifice projection for the sake of doing so.
Right. Yeah, I think people maybe make there's a flaw of getting like too far off the board, thinking, well, I want to be unique. I don't want to have the same lineup as everybody else. Like you're not gonna have the same lineup as everybody else. Unless you're going like running the absolute optimal like projected lineup from RotoGrinders, like you're gonna have a different lineup. There's so many different combinations you can have on a main slate.
So I mean, you could have won last week with oh, you can't play the Miami the Dolphins Chargers game. It's like, well, you can. I mean,
Yeah.
like the thing about the smaller field stuff, which I still 3,000 to 5,000 entries is not that small, is that you don't have to be perfect,
Right.
right? Like in the millie, maybe you're not. I mean, you don't have to be perfect there either, but you have to be way closer to perfect. That I mean, there are lineups that won single entry 3 max contest that didn't have Calvin Ridley. You probably needed Tyreek Hill, but like Calvin Ridley goes off in the early set of games. It's like, oh, you didn't need to have Austin Eckler. You don't even need to have him. Like there's you didn't have to have the Arizona Cardinals defense. You didn't need to in the millie, baby.
Yeah.
So like people need to get around the mindset of the smaller the field is, like because you have to be less perfect, like trying to find the guy that's going to be 1% owned and put up like 30 points is like you shouldn't. It's very similar, John, in soccer. I play the small field GPP type of stuff, and on any slate, there's some random center back that scores a goal that's like 1% owned in like the main GPP, like in a 135 person contest, like they're literally 0% owned. So when that goal happens, it's like this doesn't even these things don't even affect me, right? The
Right.
defense that's 0.6% owned in your single entry scores a return touchdown on the first play of the game. You're like, close your laptop, it's done. It's like dude, maybe in the millie, maybe you have much less chance there because that represents so many more lineups. But imagine someone's 0.5% owned in a 2,000 person contest. I mean, what are we talking about? We're talking about 10 lineups, and that's only one slot. They have to get the other 8 slots right. Also.
Exactly. That's the thing. Often when they're going so far off the board to get that play that's like, yeah, the third string wide receiver that, or wide receiver 3, right? That scores an 80-yard touchdown. Like the rest of their lineup is way off the board too. And the rest of the off the board plays are not hitting like the third string wide receiver that gets the 80-yard touchdown.
Right. They try to hit all, you see those lineups a lot of times in the bottom of the millie. Like if you download the CSV, you can find a good 5% of the total field that are playing lineups that it's like they need like 2% or lower players, 5% or lower players to all have the game of their lives. And it's like, dude, you don't. If that happens, you're going to win the millie by 85 points, and you're not going to need to like those extra points. It's like, dude, why don't you just kind of you like a lot of times, John, in my lineups, even for large field contests, I may not have more than 2 players that are under 5% owned in my lineups.
Yeah, you don't have to. And I do the 11 o'clock show with Eric Blindpour, like 11 o'clock to noon approximately. And like so many of the questions are about, wide receiver 3s, the backup tight end. I think this guy's going to come in over the starting tight end. He could get 2 touchdowns. He could, but yeah, like unless like if you want to play that for like a milli maker, and you just want to, you're playing one lineup, you're playing your $15. You want to sit down for Sunday football, and you're just rooting for that backup tight end, to come in and get 2 touchdowns, or the wide receiver 3 to catch 2 80-yard bombs. Like that's fine. And I'll give you my opinion. When you ask the question on the chances of that happening, but like if you're playing single entry, like if you're really trying to play every week to try to make money at NFL DFS, like those are not necessarily the plays you want to be thinking about for 90% of your
Right. Showdown, that's perfectly
Showdown.
viable. Showdown, you think about that because there's only so many options.
Yeah.
Yeah,
DFIC
exactly. DFIC in the chat, the YouTube chat. John, it says, John, with your higher volume, do you vary your builds for largest fields versus say your builds from like the King of the Beach winner, or do you enter with the same sets?
So yeah, I definitely vary my build. So like that like I won like a King of the Beach seat on Sunday, and that was like one of my main like single entry small field lineups, right? Because I think those are 5 max entries. And so that's the kind of contest I've focused a lot more on over the past like couple of years. Is like I want to have like 5, 6 like main kind of single entries that I'm copying down into all of my
Okay, so you're using
non-large
them
field.
for all of them then.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And it depends. It varies on the week, depending on like what contests I'm entering, and it will generally vary on like the qualifiers I'm entering. Like, are they 5 max or 10 max? Like sometimes I might create like 10 main like single entry lineups, if that makes sense, and then copy them down across all those fields. And then I'm also running like 150 lineup set. It's generally going to be for a much larger field. That's generally getting like way more off the board.
Right, but to me, it's more of a risk tolerance thing. I mean, you could feel free. I'm more of the type to run uniques, right? Like if I'm playing, with two 20 maxes, let's say, two different 20 maxes, I'll run 40 lineups because it's like I just want to win first in one of these two. I don't have to win first in both. So so whether or not like, oh, you have all these King of the Beach qualifiers, right? I'm going to run the same 5 lineups in 10 of them. It's like most likely if you win a seed in one of them, you're going to win a seed in like all of them. It's just a matter of like it may be the same exact, EV. It's just that your swings are going to be bigger. I'd much rather spread it out a month,
Yeah.
and I'd rather have more lineups and then win one of them. So it's like, I got a seat, right? So neither of them are correct. There's no correct way to do it. It's just what's your risk tolerance.
It actually really bit me on FanDuel this past weekend because I won the FanDuel Live final seat in like the $5,000 qualifier contest. And that was just an excellent lineup that I should have copied. And I did not copy it into everything. If I had that, I had like 30 entries in the monster. I would have won $100,000 in the monster if I just had that one entry that was like my main first tournament entry. If I just copied it to everything, it would have had like a huge day. Yeah, ended up being a good day. I got the live final seats. Uh, but yeah, I agree. Like when I made that decision not to play that lineup everywhere, I was thinking, well, I want to spread out and try to win something, right? Like if this lineup is really that good, I'm going to win the live final seat, which I did. But I also could have won a lot of more money with that seat. But yeah, you just don't know how it's going to play out. Like, and
Right.
I would lean more towards over time, like diversifying it, right? Like try to win something because that's going to keep you going in DFS rather than like the 1 week try to win everything.
Right. I mean, I see people that build like a single entry lineup for GPP, and then they're they enter the entire lobby with it, and it's like, well, I mean, like, would you rather have $15,000 into one lineup, or I would rather have $1,000 into 15 different lineups, and then win 100K in one of these contests? Over time, the ROI may end up equaling the same, but do you want what's your bankroll condition? If you're when it comes to it's a Kelly dynamic of the smaller the bankroll, the smaller percentage of that volume as percentage of your bankroll. If you're only playing 0.5% of your bankroll, I think having a less diversified on a slate is fine because like obviously you know, you could ride that out because you're only playing 0.5% of your bankroll. You're playing 20% of your bankroll on a slate. I probably wouldn't want it to be all in one lineup, right?
Yeah, especially like think about how random defensive scoring is. Like at least alter the defenses, and for the same priced defense or whatever, right? And I'd argue I think your ROI is going to be greater diversifying over time, like by a by a margin.
Before we get out of here, I want to showcase some props and pick them. We talked about Madison earlier. Uh, we have our DFS and stat level projections here at RotoGrinders. It's not just for DFS. You could use these for props and pick'em sites like Prize Picks and Underdog. And obviously, you could get our props and pick'em package, which has our expert analysts who do post, their picks and their plays. And a lot of it comes out of looking at our models. It's not just, I don't watch the games, right? I'm not watching the games and coming up with takes like that. So looking at Madison's rushing in our model currently, rushing attempts 14.92, rushing yards 63.23. If you were to calculate that and simulate it out a whole, 10,000 times, that would mean that Madison's over 47.5 at -113 on FanDuel would be considered a plus EV wager. I believe some of, if I look on Prize Picks right now, Alexander Madison's at 50.5, right? I think there's still obviously some value at a 63 rushing yards on 14 carries. I'm not sure what he is on underdog, but when in doubt, get the best number, get the best price. So currently, from what I saw right before the show, 47.5 is -113 over on FanDuel is the best, at least the best line available to the books that are going to be available to me in 2 weeks in Kentucky. Right.
Congratulations.
Right. It's I could get that if I want to drive, John, 15 minutes to Churchill Downs. I could place that bet. It's just that mobile has not opened. The regular stuff opened last week, but I'm not. I don't leave my house. I'm not going to leave my house to put down a $50 prop bet.
The number of people I know that are like driving to get geolocated right to a spot where they can either like sports bets or play DFS is kind of amazing.
Right. That I saw that there's our old RotoGrinders contributor Jam to Win.
Yeah.
You can't play DraftKings DFS in Oregon. Flew to California in order to enter contests.
Yeah, I do a show with him tomorrow. Yeah, and he's like got to fly somewhere to enter a contest. I've talked to a notable DFS player who lives in Connecticut. I guess in like FanDuel like shut down, so he's got to drive. He doesn't do basketball anymore because it's like too much daily.
Late
like,
swap. How would you do that? You couldn't do that.
Right. Yeah. So he'll drive enter his like football lineups. And he's got all week, right, to like modify them as he sees fit. Wild.
The things that people do, right?
Yeah.
But I'm on Prize Picks. I've been Kentucky Prize Picks and Underdog has been here for a while, so that's what I've been doing. The problem with that is that it's beatable. I've been very profitable with it. It's just that I'm not a big fan of the swings because the most profitable, the highest EV cards or slips or whatever are like the 4, 5, 6s. Like it's one of those things where if you pick 6 and you don't get like at least 5 winners, like you're having a losing day. Yet in like normal props, depending on the lines, like you can go 4 out of 6 and have a nice day. I mean, like because you're just betting them straight, right? And you know me, John, you know me. I'm a grind it out type. I'm not a big fan of the okay. I'm gonna lose 6 days in a row and then on the 7th day make $5,000. It's like, dude, that's what I play DFS GPPs for. I don't want my kind of like low variance cash game prop pick 'em stuff to also be the lose, win, lose, win. So once props are available here, like I'm much more likely. The only times that I will go on Underdog or Prize Picks is if the price or the number is better.
Right. It's interesting. Like I sometimes think of DFS as like a combination of player prompts, right? I mean, you're making a DFS lineup. That's basically what it is. And I've put some stuff out on Twitter. Like I think it's wild that like people will play like single game parlays and kind of prefer that over DFS. Like the profit for these companies on like same game parlays is astronomical. Like compared to even the rate.
Some of these holds, I've seen holds on some of these SUPs over 40%.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think FanDuel had like a number in New York that was like mind-boggling. It was like 40% profits. Like if you're entering a same game parlay on average, like you're losing 40%, but people prefer that to like losing 20% at DFS. At the most with rake. Mind-boggling.
So, John, Squirrelpatrol, people could find you on Twitter as usual, but you also you do content here. You have the solo ship show tomorrow. Is that free or just for premium members?
I think it's free because I can just call it up on YouTube. So it's got to be free, right? Like,
yeah, it's got to be free. It's on this channel. But you also have some articles out as well. You're on the 11 a.m. Eastern, the Sunday morning block with Eric Beinfort, which is I listen to every week. Typically, what I do on Sundays is I'll listen to Dean and the guys in the beginning, and it's like, okay, here's I get the lay of the land. I mean, obviously, I'm looking through projections. I'm building lineups. I know what's going on. So it's like, okay, it's kind of like it's the RotoGrinders and Friends show. It's like, okay, this is lighthearted. And then it's you and Eric. And it's like, you know what would be, it's like the galaxy brain show.
Yeah.
Like we're not even sure if, is this person even real? It's like,
Right.
everyone's going to play him and it could be the other guy. And that's
Yeah.
typically the way that I think in DFS, especially for week 2, where people are going to look at week 1 and go, well, what happened last week? I think that's going to happen again this week.
Yeah, my shows with Eric Bimefor, I joke they should be called like, but what if, right? Because we'll just sit there and go, but what if, and everybody thinks this is going to happen, but what if? And I think that's a great mindset for GPPs, and it's how you want to build your lineups. Really, it's like, well, everybody thinks like that this run defense is weak, the run offense is great, but what if they decide to pass? Like, what if this team realizes this, right? And they're stacking the line or whatever. Like think about these like plausible alternative scenarios.
Right. The key word is plausible. Like you mentioned before about building lineups. He's like, but what if the third tight end scores 4 touchdowns is not something that you should be caring that much about?
Right. Yeah. But what if they stack the line because they know they have a bad run defense and therefore the opposing quarterback goes off? Like that's like a plausible like thing to be thinking about.
Well, you can check out Squirrel Patrol and all those shows. Hit that thumbs up button on your way out the door.
Yeah.
I love the thummy thumbs, right? Everyone loves the thummy thumbs. It helps us out. Hit the subscribe button if you're new here. Hit the notification bell to know when we go live. You'll be able to get the solo ship show. You'll be able to get all our Sunday block shows. We got Grinders live later today for MLB. Not that big of a slate. We got crunch time right after that. We got college football content. We got MMA stuff, right? We got crunch time on Saturday for MMA, and hey, John will be on that as well. So check out all of our offerings here on YouTube, as well as all the premium content on RotoGrinders. Click on that link in the description. You'll get $10 off your first month. But I'll be back tomorrow, and we'll go through a little bit more of a deeper dive on the NFL Week 2 slate on DraftKings and FanDuel. Look at some stacks, look at some leverage plays, look at some uncertain situations, and answer your DFS strategy questions like I always try to do here as much as I can, Monday through Friday, 11 o'clock Eastern, on RotoGrinders Today.